put on my video.
Sure.
There
Awesome.
we are.
I see
You can see me now, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So how was breakfast?
Lovely. Breakfast was a delight, I have to say. You know, I look forward to it because I usually take breakfast before anybody else in the household is up and about. And it is a total peaceful, quiet time for Alan. And I can read or watch the news or go into my iPad or do whatever I want with my... I only have one cup of coffee a day, and that's it. I so look forward to that cup of coffee. So it's just simple, natural pleasure, you know, common, ordinary. And it's my favorite thing. I mean, in terms of food.
So you're an early riser, bright-eyed and
Yeah.
sharp?
Yeah, usually. But this morning, believe it or not, the alarm woke me up. I set the alarm so I could be here for us. And the alarm woke me up, and I got up at 8:30 in the morning. Usually I'm up at 6.
Wow.
So
Good for you. Did you go to bed early as well? Do you need a lot of sleep? Not a lot of sleep?
I'm 73, Randall, you know, and usually 5 or 6 hours will do me just fine, you know, because I often, after a day's work, I'll just go and lie down for a couple of hours, not have a nap, but I'll just rest and, you know, catch up on whatever and just cool out, you know, because I'm here at my desk every day for a full day. So, you know, I take it easy. I mean, I have no need to follow intense schedules. I mean, been there, done that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no urge for quickened excitement because I've had quite an exciting life. So now the orientation is to be healthy and strong and serve. And that's it. And whatever it takes to be healthy and strong and serve, that's what I do.
Well, you sure look good for 73, I gotta say. You still got a full head of hair. Your
Yes.
skin looks smooth and taut, and
Yes.
obviously you're sharp.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's except for my back, which is a bitch. My lower back, discs have deteriorated. Hello, I'm a very tall man. I've always been a bit heavy set, and I've had a sedentary lifestyle, except for incredible amount of traveling, you know. But yeah, thank God. I hope to live to be very old because I love this time of life when I'm not pressured to promote myself.
Right.
I'm not pressured that I mean, I have to work. I'm not a wealthy person, but I love the work that I do. So it feels like, oh, well, thank God I can go to work this morning. How lovely is that? And really, and so yeah, I want to be old because it's comfortable, except for the back. But it's very comfortable. The sense of being close to divinity, to being, if I might use this word, precious. You know, have a storehouse of a certain amount of information that's valuable for other people, and I honor that. So this is and I have grandchildren whom I absolutely adore. So this is a wonderful time of
Life
life.
is good. And you live in paradise.
I live in what used to be paradise, what now is, well, this is an island that is much larger than Manhattan Island for sure, but we receive 1 million tourists a month.
Oh, wow.
A month.
Do you speak Balinese?
But, I speak Indonesian.
Is that what they speak there? Mostly?
Yeah, well, there are 250 languages in Indonesia. So there are, I think there are 8,000 uninhabited islands. There are like 13 or 16,000, depending how you count them, islands, of which 6,000 to 8,000, 8,000 I think was the last number, are inhabited with 250 languages. So in order for the country, for people from one island to another island to understand each other, and for politically to have a sense that you're in one country, there is an official language, one official language, and that's Indonesian. So my staff speak to each other in Balinese, and I know a few words, but I don't understand them. But they speak to me in Indonesian, and I speak Indonesian. So that's how it works.
Well, that must be of interest to you. Obviously, you're into linguistics, and I imagine that each language must have it has its own syntax, and it must have its own perspective on everything. You must have a
Well,
lot
that's
of.
very true. No, I have a lot of lenses I can look through,
Hmm.
and that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
But I mean, for example, in Indonesian, it's Malay. It's a Malay language. So when I go to Malaysia, people understand me perfectly when I speak to them in Indonesian, and I understand them, even though there are a lot of words that are different. The pronunciation is different, but in Indonesian and Malay is closer than, say, Danish and Norwegian, which are basically the same language but spoken with different accents and things, and much closer than, let's say, French and Italian. So they're pretty well understood. But Balinese has three levels of language. You have low Balinese, you have middle Balinese, and you have high Balinese. And depending on your social class, and because they're Hindu here, so you have a caste system. So depending on your caste and depending on the age of the person, you'll speak one of these three levels. Like my staff, they speak Balinese Kasar, which is low Balinese, and it's ordinary when people speak to each other in the streets. My partner, who's Balinese, speaks middle Balinese, so he doesn't understand the staff, so he speaks to them in Indonesian. Then when we go to visit high people, he will speak to them in Indonesian because to speak to them in middle Balinese would be impolite. So he understands a few things that they're saying, but he doesn't understand everything they're saying at all because high Balinese is very different than middle Balinese. So I know a few words of high Balinese to be polite, and then I say my hello, how are you, in high Balinese, and then I switch into Indonesian. And I know a few words of low Balinese, which makes my staff hysterical when I say them. They start laughing at me or with me. And so I speak Indonesian, yeah.
Well, it's quite a dichotomy for someone like yourself living in such a hierarchical society, really. Eh? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
as the promotion of oneness and wholeness to be in such a hierarchical culture. Is that?
It's worse in India. Because in India they have untouchables.
Right.
And here there's no such thing as untouchables. In India they have 4 castes. Here they have 3. There's no such thing as an untouchable. And then amongst the young people, when they're dealing with themselves, they don't make those distinctions. But, for example, when Wira, my partner, who is he doesn't have a caste. I mean, he's of the ordinary people. 93% of people are ordinary people, and then the top 7% are caste people. When he visits his best 2 friends, they're caste. They are higher caste people. So he speaks to them in Indonesian. They speak to him in Indonesian. But when he speaks to their parents, he's differential. He speaks to them in polite Balinese and then switches into Indonesian, so that by speaking to them polite Balinese, he's being respectful, and then switching into Indonesian to be practical. For me, I don't see that as social stratification that inhibits the movement of love. I don't see that. I see it as an integrated system that works. It works. And I don't see, because you have, for example, you can have your taxi cab driver be of the highest caste, and you can have someone who is of a very ordinary caste and come from a very nice a family that's very nicely financially placed. Like Wira's family is a comfortable family, and they're of ordinary caste. So this thing about caste and money is no longer valid. It's just no longer valid. And I see it more as an antiquated cultural expression that is quickly leaving. And as I say, the young people just don't observe it anymore. The high caste young people feel embarrassed to be with their friends if their friends are differential, because they're all adolescents or they're all in their 20s, so they would rather not be talked to in that way, and that's why the kids speak in Indonesian.
Wow, that's an interesting development, isn't it? That the
It
globalization,
is.
yeah, yeah. So,
It is. So here in this country, in this island, it's a very special island because it's a Hindu island in an ocean of Islam. And so on this Hindu island, Hindu animistic island, um, there is a harmony that permeates the entire island. I feel very safe here. Because of my age, I'm treated with deferential politeness, which you don't find in the West. They say, hey, old man, move your butt, you know. And here, it's, hello, sir, may I help you? Or, how nice to see you today, sir, and I hope you're feeling well. And just total kindness.
right.
Total kindness. Yeah.
Well, that seems to be part of the Asian culture, I think, to some degree. I live in Vancouver, and there's a very large Asian population that's really that the city's becoming very Asian, and you really notice what you were saying, that you see the families walking down the street in the evenings, where you don't see the people born here doing that anymore. They're in their houses watching their televisions. The Asian families are out walking with the family. They're out. They seem like we were like in the 50s in a way. They're very family oriented and kind of very gracious and.
Yeah, they all go out together.
Yeah.
I know that, for example, Wira is going up to, he sees his family on a very regular basis. His family lives about an hour and a half from here. They live on this most beautiful location. It's on the side of a crater of a volcano, and the volcano crater is filled with water. So it's an enormous lake, but it's a crater, and they live on the side of this crater, and it's the fruit growing capital of Bali, and it's just beautiful. And he's going up to be with his parents to visit his in-laws, his brother's wife's parents, who live in a mountain area about an hour and a half from there. And the whole family goes, the grandchildren, the grandmother, the great aunt, everybody. They pack up and they go and they visit the other family, and they sit around and they share tea and snacks and they talk. And then that family comes to his people's family, and it goes on and on like that, you know? Even in Portugal, you go out in Portugal and you see families together. You see, Portugal's my second home. You see families together, and the structure of family is still very, very important, and it's much less so in North America. Much less so.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. So you have obviously a very international sort of life and experience. What do you see? Do you see an overall? You mentioned a lot about polarity on your website. I mentioned you're talking about what's going on these days is obviously dramatic polarity. Do you see that as a general state of humanity? Do you see it as a well? I'll let you answer that. How do you see the state of humanity right now?
My theme for teaching. I began it when Trump took office. I assumed a theme for my teaching. And the general theme under which I'm conducting all my lectures, all my workshops, my whole approach right now is how to remain conscious in an unconscious world. So it is essential that men and women like ourselves, men and women of goodwill, men and women who are functioning primarily for the good of humanity, who have shaped their lives for social function, positive social functioning. I've never seen the world in a more chaotic state than now. You don't feel it so much on this island, but you feel it everywhere else I've been. You feel that people are in a greater sense of tension than I've ever experienced people, ever. And not just in the United States, where I am sure, I know for a fact, because I have so many friends in America. I'm American. I have so many friends in America. I have family in America. It's the tension is horrible, and the sense of not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow is, well, of course, the government does that on purpose so that I can stay in control of the people. But this sense, and Trump is the perfect vehicle for destabilization so that more government controls can be imposed. That's just how it works. Read 1984. So, and in Europe right now, I mean, it's rather quite possible that that Marine Le Pen will be elected as president of France. Especially how convenient that the other day, yesterday, some people unfortunately were shot by an Islamic terrorists right on the eve of the French elections, and of course Madame Le Pen comes right in there and says, "Close all the mosques, immediately, close all the mosques." So, and that's going to help her. That shooting, and I don't think she arranged it, it just happened that way, is definitely going to help her. And I wouldn't put it past the mindset of an Islamic organization to say, shoot somebody now before the election so they elect Mrs. Le Pen, and that there is greater polarization in Europe, and we have more excuse for more terrorism. I mean, I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying that it wouldn't surprise me if it was set up that way. And I don't think Madame Le Pen had anything to do with that. But what I'm saying is some strategically minded terrorist organization knows that if they shoot somebody on the Champs-Élysées, the 2 days before the French election, that's going to push more people to the right. So with Brexit, and with what's happening in France, and what's happening in the United States, and by repercussion, because if it happens in the United States, it happens all over the world. The dollar is the mode of collective currency. I mean, the U.S. dollar is the international currency. It creates greater polarization. And the more polarization there is, the more freaked out people become, the more violence there's going to be, and more excuses for governments to impose martial law and for the military corporate complexes which govern the world to have more control. Now, since I'm not a first-rate person, I'm a second-rate person. I'm not a person that's oriented to power. I'm a person that's oriented to love and to wisdom. So I've never been able, intellectually I understand it, and I'm a student of history like yourself. So I understand why certain people like to conquer other people, and why, one country will be delighted to own the territory of another country. As an individual, I would only say, can we all love each other, please? Can the good word be spread around, and can I help at that in some way with my big mouth? So, yes, I mean, so I never could get it inside of myself what the thrill is about conquering other people, you understand? But obviously, that is the thrill of a lot of people, and as far as I'm concerned, that's what's taking place right now. This urge for power. People in power, they don't understand they're going to die. I mean, they understand it intellectually, but they don't grasp the relationship between mortality and immortality. They just keep on going and going as if they're going to live forever. It's horrible.
Well, let's bring that into this conversation. The concept of immortality and mortality, or esoteric and exoteric. I mean, yes. The exoteric situation is all this conflict between three-dimensional beings, and I imagine the esoteric, the grand vision, is a greater purpose. It's like what you're mentioning about Saturn, that it can be restrictive or it can be self-disciplined. So we're being presented with this opportunity in these wacky times to have a certain clarity within this polarity, I imagine. So I guess what I want to ask you is, how do you see the forces at play here in the big picture?
I would be totally presumptuous if I said I knew what the ultimate plan was. What I can say is that I do know about the heart of God and the quality of transcendental love, or love applied transcendentally. I do know about consciousness and consciousness applied transcendentally. And I do know that there is a hierarchy of masters and teachers whose grace and wisdom and love permeates those who are sensitive enough to be receptive to it. I believe in a Christ. and I believe in a Buddha. I do. But the forces of darkness are much more appealing to the animal nature of man and the lightness of being is not obtainable to the majority of people. All right, yes, ideally, we can all be saved, we can all be redeemed if we accept the Redeemer into our hearts. But the majority of people don't know how to do that. And the majority of people are inundated with fear and are surrounded by glamour and are threatened by violence. And they are captured in the thraldom of those dynamics, which makes it impossible to reach for the stars, much less to know in every cellular fiber that the heart of God is real, alive, and lives within me. That takes a tremendous amount of effort and/or a tremendous amount of suffering.
Well, that's the paradox, isn't it, in a way?
Yes.
That conflict is the way to consciousness, and conflict is what we're all mired in.
That is correct, because in the ancient wisdom teachings we are taught that the earth is not a sacred planet. And because the earth has not reached its level of sacredness, it is still in a place of dynamic evolution. Look, my friend, Tyrannosaurus Rex still lives. In other words, the body of Tyrannosaurus Rex has already evolved into some bird of prey, okay? I mean, it's no longer a dinosaur, it's flying up there as a condor or something like that. But the spirit of Tyrannosaurus Rex is very much alive in Pol Pot. The spirit of Tyrannosaurus Rex is very much alive in Ted Bundy. The spirit of Tyrannosaurus Rex is very much involved in child molesters. It's very much alive in those people who take a glee and sexual satisfaction in harming other human beings. So the raptors are among us, only they do not wear scales. They have flesh. And the evolution of the raptor in man, in human, will take quite a bit of time. And hierarchy, and if you will, and I'll use this in the broadest possible way, the saints, S-A-I-N-T-S, the saints can only come down so far. We have to go up in order to reach a place where the communication between that which is transcendently delicate, that which is transcendently transparent, it's so subtle. It's so subtle that if you're living in the gross, the subtlety cannot enter, and the gross cannot enter the subtlety. So those of us, like yourself, Randall, and like myself, and tens of thousands of other brothers and sisters who stand as mediators between the subtle and the gross, and who struggle with their own grossness, and who rejoice in the awareness that there is a part of us already redeemed in the subtleness of love and wisdom. So in that sense, that gives us the strength to move forward and to keep on digging in the deep, transforming shit into gold. Being the alchemists of our times in whatever large and small way we can, so that we can contribute to this process of helping the subtle reach the gross and the gross reach the subtle without ourselves becoming filthy in the process, or being so spiritual that we, I'd rather not go there if you please. You go there. Listen, I'm leaving here. I'm going back to Europe where it's denser and crazier, because I can be of greater, at this age, it's so nice just to hang out here in my garden and my swimming pool. And I'm going back to so I can be of greater service in the flesh. And it's not money, I assure you. I assure you. It's not that. I mean, for God's sake, I sit here and I live very well, thank you very much. I make a very good, I'm not going anywhere for money. I'm going to be of service, and I'm consciously entering the fray. You know, it's because that's what you do if you're so inclined. And if you're not, if you have a different life, well, then you do something else. But if you're so inclined, I'm Aries Scorpio, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to enter into the fray. But in the larger picture, as you have been asking, we are in a relatively primitive stage of evolution. We have so far to go until all of us, every human being, can smile at each other and say, Namaste. I salute the name of God within you. I believe in goodness. Let me touch your child with kindness. When I was growing up, you could touch children, you could smile at them, you'd pat them on the cheek, you'd reach into your bag and give them, or your pocket, give them a candy or whatever. And now, before I touch a child in a mall or in a supermarket or have a little conversation with a 5-year-old because they're so sweet, yeah. I look at the parents and I smile, I acknowledge the parent first, and then I talk to the child. Because you have to, otherwise they think you're some sort of nut. Yeah. And that's a shame. That's so sad.
So is it a critical mass that needs to be reached, or do you think that
yes.
every single individual, the critical mass is not 51% though, is it to you in your mind?
No. It has to reach a critical mass of a certain level of consciousness. It doesn't mean that it reaches a critical mass where we're all arhats. It means a critical mass in which the vast majority of people know within themselves that they are a light of divinity, that they know and respect within themselves that the light of God manifests through them. And when I say light of God, I'm not talking about some old guy on a throne with a beard, you know. I'm not talking about Zeus on his throne, for God's sake, because I'm not an idol worshiper, so I don't think God looks like me. Okay, although I look pretty good, but a good imitation of what God's supposed to look like. But when I say God, I speak about the integrated, synthesized spirit of the will to be, which manifests through us in our own individual way, but whose essence is the same. And that essence, in terms of my identification, is a creative, loving, intelligent entity. It has every form that you could possibly imagine and no form at all. But to me, it lives. It lives. It's alive.
What's our relationship to that? Are we fractals of that? Are we creators of that? If that's the case, this is where the dichotomy comes here. Of why is there such a mass of people, as you were saying, that seem to do not have that innate sense of that light, as you might call it? If that's all done by the same creation, I guess it's what you're saying, that we're plopped here to live it out.
Well, there is a certain degree of freedom of choice. There is a certain degree of independent orbiting within the whole. And there's also a thing called streams of evolutionary unfoldment. Now, I was born aware, from the earliest time I can remember, I was born aware with two senses about me. 3 now that I'm talking now. 3. One was that there was an invisible world surrounding me that was pregnant with life. I knew that from the time I was very small. All right. 2, I really, really, really wanted to be objective to myself. I really wish that I could see outside of myself and observe myself. Not because I was narcissistic, but because I was aware that there was a movement of intelligence, there was a movement of consciousness, that if I were witnessing it, I would be more in touch with it. And I would be more in touch with myself. And I remember that as one of the earliest thoughts I had as a little child. All right? And then I also remember, as a little child, contemplating infinity. I can remember being 8 years old, lying on the grass, looking up at the sky, and saying to myself, well, if the universe is in a circle, what's outside the circle? There has to be, what's outside the circle? And there I am, like this little chubby 8-year-old, lying in the grass, contemplating the shape of infinity. And I came to the conclusion that I could never know that. And so then I said, well, I think you're just going to have to accept the sky. So I said, okay, I didn't know I was going to become an astrologer. And then, okay, I'll accept the sky. And those are earliest recognitions. Well, most children do not have those recognitions. So, and there are children that have recognitions that are far more evolved than that little kid lying in the grass. So some people are born conscious. Then when you're growing up, that consciousness is challenged by your adolescent hormones. It's challenged by the family around you. If you're lucky, you have conscious parents. Most of us did not. Some of us had loving parents, but not necessarily conscious. So then you're looked at as a freak, and you have to go through that, wait a minute, who's nuts here, them or me? And you have to make your way through. Eventually, you find other young people like yourself, and you begin to have, I was young in the 60s and 70s, so you have your family, your commune, your other brothers and sisters that you love and make love with, and you learn about all sorts of things from a really beautiful place of sharing. And you get on with it until you, if you're very, very fortunate, you meet your master, teaching. You find yourself inhabited by the light of Christ. You find yourself focused through the lens of Buddha. You find the mind and heart merging. You find that through that a path is unfolding for your own concrete participation, and you move your butt and you do it.
Was there a particular event, a moment, a sentence that...
Yeah. I was 23 years old. It was October 24th, 1967, in the East Village of Manhattan, meditating, about 10, 15, something like that at night. And in my meditation, because I had been practicing yoga and meditation from the time I was 19, and so I'm 23, so I'm meditating. And in my inner meditation, a message comes through. I quote, "Become an astrologer, my son. That will lead you to your path." Well, I knew. Now my hairs are standing up on edge. Now, I knew nothing about astrology, okay? I was taking a PhD program in Romance languages, in Latin American, Portuguese, and Spanish, to be specific. And I dropped out, as all good hippie youth did in the 60s. I dropped out from my PhD program because I can't conjugate verbs and anymore. I've got to do something else with my life. And I don't care about Brazilian literary criticism, okay? But and I knew nothing about astrology other than I'm an Aries. I knew that because of my date of birth, and I'd follow it in the daily newspaper, the daily horoscope, like everybody else. I know nothing else about the Sunday. And then the next day, I followed that beautiful, loving mandate. I called my mother up and I said, "Can you lend me some money?" I had no money. "Can you lend me some money? I need to buy some books. Can I come home and live at your house again for a while?" And my mother said yes to both of those. So she lent me, I asked for $25. Bless her heart, she gave it to me. In 1967, you could buy more than one book with $25. And I looked up in the yellow pages, astrological bookstores. I found one in relative easy distance from where I lived. I took a bus and got there, bought an astrology kit, locked myself up in my room, and started studying and studying and studying and studying. And then what I knew before started to come back. It was just reawakened. And so within a very few months, I was reading horoscopes for people and saving my money, traveling by subway and bus with little books, and there were no computers at the time, bookcase, little book in a book bag, and going around, saving. I finally saved up enough money to get my own little apartment, my own little studio apartment in Manhattan, and I had 1 month down, 1 month rent, and a 1 month security, and maybe $40 in my pocket. And I did it. I moved into that apartment and started doing charts, and the charts literally, the fee I got was literally to eat with, because I didn't want to be dependent on my parents. They weren't rich people anyway. So, and I was guided from that point before that, but that specific time, to answer your question, specifically, it was October 27th, 1967 at around 10:15 in Manhattan, where I got the message to follow my path. So yes, that's what happened.
And how did that evolve into, obviously, esoteric astrology? I imagine you started with the basics at first. No, you went right into.
Right into it. You see, I was told that astrology would lead me to my path. He didn't tell me that astrology would be your path. He said, become an astrologer, my son. That will lead you to your path. So I went down, I bought the normal, astrology books, but then with the extra money I was making from charging, $10, then $25, woohoo, for reading, I found in my second shopping spree for books the book by Alan Leo called Esoteric Astrology. Now, I thought that was the Word of God speaking to me directly because my name is Alan, spelled A-L-A-N. There are variations of how you spell that name. His was A-L-A-N. His last name was Leo. And my mother told me I was born at a certain time, which would have given me Leo rising, which I later found out was not my birth time, and I had Scorpio rising. But in any event, at that time, I was under the illusion that I had Leo rising. So when I see a book called Esoteric Astrology by Alan Leo, I went, ding dong. I took it. I opened it, and he was the... in the 19-teens, 1914 to about 1920, whenever, he was the head of the astrological lodge within the Theosophical organization. So I immediately got into theosophy and astrology pretty much at the same time. Well, then I kept on studying astrology, but then I started buying books by Annie Besant, by Olcott, and I remember going into a bookstore and they had The Secret Doctrine in 2 gorgeous volumes on sale for $5. I said, oh my Lord, let's go for that. So I bought The Secret Doctrine in 2 volumes, fabulous, I still have them, $5, they're in America, $5, and I said, I may not be able to read it at this time, because I opened it and I said, oh my God, I can't read this. I put it away. I said, but later on in life, Oken, you'll be able to read it. And of course that happened. So then here was my Secret Doctrine. Then I read all the Annie Besant books and the Leadbeater books. And all the time I was reading Theosophy, I was also studying astrology. So I immediately, being good Gemini moon that I am, I immediately had 2 dynamics working simultaneously. But in this case, they weren't polarizing each other. They were complementing each other, which was astrology and the ancient wisdom teachings. So the astrology was awakening my relationship between my intellect and my intuition. And the theosophical dynamic was awakening the relationship between my heart and my intuition. So then I didn't know it at the time, but I was being awakened to the secondary path of love wisdom through astrology and theosophy. And then from theosophy, I found my way into the Alice Bailey material. And I've been a student of the Alice Bailey material since 1974.
Wow. And I imagine as your life grows richer, the depth of your knowledge obviously enhances all the information, the structure that you've already learned within astrology.
My love enhances that. My love enhances that. The quality of my love enhances my knowledge, and it becomes wisdom. And as I grow, the Christ and the love of God just, I'm pretty mystical. I guess you can't tell that by my language, but I'm a pretty mystical guy, and the sense of immanent divinity, God to me is immanent, and I breathe it, and I pray, and it immediately responds, and I don't know, people can define that any way they like, but I'm not lost in space. My ass is on the line. I'm out in the world. I'm working. I'm not, I'm in a bit of an ivory tower here in Bali, but I'm on Skype all the time. I'm doing webinars all the time. I'm writing all the time. And here in Bali, if anybody needs my help, I'm here to be of service. Now, I told you I'm moving back to Europe because I feel, okay, I have to come out and be more accessible to more people in the flesh. Sure. So yes, this mystical sense of divinity, both transcendental and immanent, I live in that, and that gives me the strength and the courage to keep on going, because I don't have to. I could live here for the rest of my life. I have 3 house helpers. I mean, come on. Yeah. In Portugal, I won't have any. Unless I make a huge amount of money. So I mean, there's a very definite reorientation of life style in order to be out in the world. Yeah.
That's for sure. So let me go back to the human being. How would you break down the aspects that make up a human being?
Well, okay. There are 3. One is the personality. The other is the soul, or the higher self, and the third is spirit, which in the teachings is called monad. So if I am in touch with what I call my own divine spirit, that's my spirit. That's the monad in me, which is connected to the monad in everybody else, which is connected to the Christ monad. So then that manifests through soul, which awakens the consciousness. You are alive in consciousness on the level of the soul. You're alive in intelligence on the level of personality. So your intelligence is always skewered by your personality dynamics, by your personally devised belief systems, rather than your connection to more universal presence. Because you cannot be in a more universal presence unless you're alive on the level of your soul. And when you're alive on the level of your soul, the orientation to divinity becomes much more of a living presence. When you're in the personality exclusively, in other words, you're functioning from the level of the solar plexus downward, the heart is maybe beginning to quicken, and you have this relationship between the solar plexus and the heart that goes back and forth for any number of years or any number of incarnations until you're anchored in the heart. Once you're anchored in the heart, your intuition begins to unfold so that you are able to perceive qualitatively. And you're able to perceive on the level of energy. And the level of your perception, or of energetic perception, is relative to your level of consciousness. But because your heart is awakened, you are redeemed, and if I can use a Christian frame of reference, you're redeemed in the Christ, you're redeemed in love. And when I say the Christ, the same word Christ is Krishna. So I'm not making that exclusive as a Christian. I'm not Christian, but I love Lord Jesus, and I'm so grateful that the Christ is slightly, a little bit alive in my heart, so much alive enough that I can recognize it. And so then what happens is that once the heart is a centered vehicle, and you're not alone. You don't have to be afraid of solitude. You don't have to be afraid of loneliness. You don't have to be afraid. You're not exclusive anymore, right? Because your heart is open. Then your third eye begins to quicken. See? And so then you have a relationship between the Christ and the Buddha. See? And when they join, you have love wisdom. And through that you perceive on the level of the soul. Well, once you're perceiving on the level of the soul, other men and women who have been quickened on that level, and there's a natural attraction. So you're going to meet other men and women who are also quickened on that level. Just as if you're alcoholic, you meet other alcoholics. If you're a drug addict, you meet other drug addicts. If you are a God addict, you're going to meet other God addicts. It's as simple as that. Only this addiction is pretty cool. It gives life, it doesn't take it. It gives strength, it doesn't take it. It gives resurrection as you breathe. It doesn't kill you. Okay? And it allows me to feel the presence of divinity no matter what church I'm in, no matter what temple I'm in, because it doesn't give exclusive fundamentalism. It gives exclusive fundamentalism. It gives inclusive loving. Hey, that's a pretty good deal, you know? So then, once this sense of consciousness is developed or is developing, then there is this awareness of spirit, and the aspiration to enter the Father's house becomes very powerful. Lord Jesus said, I am the way to the Father's house. So what I get from that is that the soul, because Jesus as Christ is representing the soul of humanity. So as I enter into the soul of humanity, the mother's house, if you will, that will give me at least a ticket to approach the Father's house. Now what happens when I get into the Father's house? I don't know. Haven't gotten there yet. You know, I'm still a child of the mother. Okay? I mean, I'm functioning as a soul through this personality, knowing that I'm being vivified by spirit. But what that spirit is, I haven't been initiated to a degree high enough to know. I just know it's there. And I know it's there. I don't know what it is. And I certainly don't know it as myself. I know my soul as myself. But I don't know spirit as myself. That will remain maybe for another incarnation, 2 or 3. Who knows? It's God's grace. But to me, that's the 3-in-1, the triune of the human nature.
And do they all have their own lineage? By that, what I mean is that it seems to me that at that first level you're talking about, we have our genetic history. We have our history of our genes. The second level seems to be the lineage of our archetype.
Well, you are my brother here, you know, because that's how I see it too. That's how I see it also. In the ageless teachings, it tells us that our soul has a ray and our personality has a ray. I mean, they could be the same ray, but they're functioning on different levels. And one is on the archetypal level, which is the soul, and the other is on the level of biological karma.
That's what attracted me to astrology as a young person as well. It seemed to have those two elements, their movement together.
That's what esoteric astrology teaches.
See, I'm fairly new to
Traditional astrology, when it's practiced correctly, could be called humanistic psychological astrology, in which we're dealing with people's day-to-day life situations, trying to help them function as an integrated entity. And then it's then, once you're functioning as an integrated personality, that the soul can your growth can be accelerated on the level of the soul, because your vitality is not being inundated with problems on the level of the personality. So you're no longer fighting personality. My mother did this to me, and my father did that to me, and my sister's a bitch, and whatever, you know, and my boss is a representation of my father, and, you know, on and on and on. Psychological dynamics. If you don't have to deal with those anymore, You can deal directly with the dynamic between your biological lineage and your soul lineage, with your archetypal imperative and your biological karma, if you will. The alignment is much easier to make, and then you really make progress. Then you really make progress.
It's funny because progress is a funny term because it feels like progress, but it also feels like, wow, now it's a whole new another full endeavor to make your way through.
Well, when I say progress, I don't mean it on a linear level.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about, if we're looking at shapes, I'm looking much more as a spiral than I am as a line.
Right. It's actually the line through the spiral, even, right?
Thank you. That you got it. That's it. It's the line through the spiral. It's the line, and that has a name in the ancient teachings. Antakarana, if you will, is what it's called. Between soul and personality, the rainbow bridge, if you like. And there you are. I mean, that straight line, if you will, to me, that's the magnetic current, which allows me to know when I am off my center or when I'm centered.
Right.
I mean, it allows me to go, okay, Oken, a little to the left, please, or a little to the right, please. Can you make a little adjustment here? There we are. Now that's nice. Right? Yeah. And that allows me to go up in that spiral and stay and integrate, keep my point of focus as integrated and whole.
And that's dimensional awareness, right? That's the next level dimensional awareness. See, this is all. See, I wasn't familiar with esoteric astrology until the last couple of months. That's why one of the reasons why I contacted you is because I've been integrating a lot of information from various sources that have their relationship to different practices or knowledge networks. So this aspect of astrology is very intriguing to me because it aligns with a certain shamanistic tradition that I'm aligned with that says there are 3 attentions, and it perfectly aligns with the three that you just spoke of, with the monad, the spirit, the monad, the soul, and the personality.
And the personality. Right. Could I ask you what the name of that tradition is? That shamanic tradition?
Well, you could say it's Toltec, but it's. I would say, I don't know if you're familiar with Carlos Castaneda. Have you read Carlos Castaneda?
Carlos Castaneda. I did indeed when I was much younger.
Well, I've been interviewing another fellow who's a Nagual, who's a master dreamer, you could say. He has very much developed his second and third attentions. So through his dreaming practices, he's consciously aware of the second and third attentions, and so I've been getting these different information and trying to align it all with all these various disciplines and practices and knowledge to try to integrate them all. So it's awesome to be talking to you about this.
Well, it would seem to me that gentleman is saying the same thing as I am, only in different language.
Exactly.
But the state of consciousness to which I'm referring and to which he refers is the same.
Exactly. And he's driven in a way by the same thing that you are, that now is a time to engage in the first attention with the world that we are all here together in, and to bring this information out to the world. So I find that there's a lot of synchronicity, a lot of alignment there between a lot of people who have taken their lineages, their disciplines to a very elevated state and are now in the act of giving it away, sharing it.
Yeah, I have been on YouTube to hear some of the younger teachers of our time. And some of the younger teachers of our time, I mean, men and women in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And some of them are very, very special people. But the majority are promoting themselves. Mm-hmm. They're building careers.
Right. Spiritual entrepreneurs, I call them.
Yes. But then again, that's what the personality demands whilst we're in a Western body. It's only when you get to be of a certain age where that stuff doesn't matter anymore. that you can really move more unselfishly through life. And I'm trying at this point, my personal struggle is to not be more unselfish, but to be completely unselfish. Okay? Because more unselfish, I definitely am. Completely unselfish, I'm not.
Right.
So, but at least it gives me a shot at it, And I still have a number of years, if God wills, on this planet to totally give myself and to feel comfortable in that. So that's what I'm working on now. But when I see the younger people, there's so much involved with image and with making connections and getting on the right TV programs and on and on and on with self-promotive activities. But that is totally normal and natural for Western people. So, there it is.
Yeah. I've struggled with judgment of that at times. I don't have it anymore. Same with you, because with age, I understand that that you just become wiser with age. You just do. If you're on a path of evolution of awareness, you're just going to change. You're going to adjust. I shouldn't say. Some people will, some people won't. Some people might be locked into that paradigm of it's like the New Age movement in a way is kind of it's just a more subtle corruption of what we're talking about, but it's just as insidious in a way.
It's very insidious. When I lived in New Mexico, I lived for many, many years in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Fabulous place, beautiful. And the spiritual glamour of Santa Fe, New Mexico was incredible. And you would have all what I call them, even though it was New Mexico, I call them California crystal ladies, who were all dressed in diaphanous clothes and all channeling God knows who from God knows where. That was in the 80s. That was very popular in the 80s to be a channel for such and such and such and such. There's stages you go through, and as you get older, that stuff just falls away, and you can't be bothered with it, or you become more enraptured by it, right. And you become more condensed, and the people who follow you become sycophants, and you become an archetype of a false guru.
I think it's got to do with that line that you're talking about, of finding that alignment with it, with the swirl, is that when you have attachments to your image and your presence, if you're not sensitive to that, you can get caught up in that. The ones that don't get caught up in that,
easy.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in that. Very easy to get caught up in that. But then you have to be aware of people's expectations.
Right.
In other words, if I'm speaking in front of an audience, I'm going to make sure my hair is combed. I'm going to make sure I'm wearing a nice shirt. I'm going to make sure that I have a clean appearance. But then again, I like that.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to see that whatever you're wearing, whatever colors you're wearing, whatever is going to have an effect on other people. Right. So you have to be aware of the physical plane, because the physical plane and the personality also has an energy.
Right. Well, you can be impeccable with detachment, I imagine.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly. Because it's all about your level of attachment. Right. Certain things are effective vehicles, and other things are traps.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, how old are you?
I'm 54 as of 3 days ago.
Well, mazel tov. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's very nice. 3 days ago. We are the 22nd. So you're the last degree of Aries?
Yeah, 28 degrees of Aries.
All right. Well, you just got in there. Just slipped right in there.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I noticed, because like I say, I've just been looking into esoteric astrology lately, and there's quite a difference in the rulers of each planet, because, I mean, it's I don't see much relation between some of these. I mean, like, how can Gemini be ruled by Venus when I've always understood it to be ruled by Mercury, or, you know what I mean? It's quite a...
Well, but on the level of the soul,
right,
you're functioning on the law of attraction.
Mm.
So what Venus is doing is providing a vehicle. Since Venus rules the law of attraction, she also rules the law of repulsion, and that's manifested through Libra, because in Libra you're either attracted or you're repulsed. You know, so so what happens on the level of the soul, on the level of the Antakarana, you have this dynamic of trying to bring in the basic duality of Gemini, and the primary duality of Gemini is soul personality life. So with Venus, you bring in something to harmonize that.
Awesome. That's awesome.
You try to harmonize dualities. I mean, for example, I have 3 planets in Gemini in my chart, including the moon.
Right.
So I found in my early life I was very dual in my emotions. One was like very hedonistic, and the other was very altruistic. And the two were like, you know, some days I'd be into total hedonism, and other days I'd be into, you know, totally I mean, they were like this. Then when that went the way of all things, and there was a union that took place, the orientation was, okay, now how do I join my personality and my soul? You know, how do I bring those together? That was the duality I was focusing on, not the duality of, oh, well, in this situation I'm going to be selfish, and in this situation I'm going to be generous.
Well, that's the difference between, as you were saying before, the personality and then the soul journey. I can see why that was the attraction for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now your organization, Zero World.
Yes, it's yeah. Oh yes.
And I saw that, and my first thought immediately was the Portuguese word for the. You hear me?
Oh no, you just froze for a second there. You're back now.
Okay.
I caught you to the Portuguese word.
Yeah, well, between U, which is O, and world, and I said, well, that was my first hit, and I said, wait a minute, go into English, Alan, and then I saw, oh, well, zero world, so he must mean unity, one world.
It means lots of things. It's for me, it was a good title because it represents many things. At this personality level, it could mean one world. At this soul level, it could mean that. Or at the spirit level, we could say it could mean that out of the void comes worlds. So to me, it's a multi-dimensional. You know, it can be interpreted in many ways. So So.
And may I ask, where will this interview be published or expressed?
Well, on my website, on YouTube, and I'm hoping to put together a documentary over the next year or two with
wonderful.
With putting together this information, as I was mentioning, that kind of unites a lot of different perspectives of the same thing.
Have you ever come across the work of Justin Wilkinson?
No.
Go to YouTube. Justin Wilkinson is a young man. He's under 30. Mm-hmm. Maybe he's about 28 now. And he does these amazing videos on esoteric themes.
I will check him out.
Mm-hmm. His work is pretty special.
Okay, I will definitely look at it. Yeah, there he is. Okay, I got it bookmarked. I will look at it later on tonight.
Lovely.
So, can you draw a map of draw sort of a not a map. If you were to draw a picture of the universe from the point of view of the being, the human being. We know there's polarity in everything, right? There's polarity in all those 12 archetypes. So what's that polarity, and what are the archetypes in your view? I mean, how does that paint a picture of the universe of awareness, at least as far as the human being understands it? Is that too broad and too vague?
It's vague for me.
Okay.
That's vague for me because it allows me entry into a zillion different places to respond.
Right. I guess this is kind of an area where I'm getting a lot of information from a person who's channeling a lot of information about sacred geometry, the torus.
Yes, that's true.
And all that kind of thing. And the 12 archetypes that are represented through astrology represent the Metatron's cube, the points of awareness that come together to create the whole. So I guess what I'm trying to find out from a person like yourself who can explain it to the average person. How do you integrate those 12 archetypes that are represented in astrology which is kind of, you could say, I mean, the polarity that we're talking about within those, is that the line that we were talking about earlier that needs to be reconciled? The polarity that needs to be reconciled within this dimensional
the polarity that
environment?
needs to be reconciled transcends astrology.
Of course. Right.
I could speak about the polarity of the sixth pair of signs, Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, Gemini, Sagittarius, etc., and the dynamics of alignment that are required in order to befriend your natural polarity. In other words, I'm an Aries, so are you. Libra is the natural polarity, and how do we come into contact with our own inner Libra nature, or how does the Libra nature come in contact with its own Aries nature? I mean, that is a subject of a lecture that I'm sure I've given in the past. So there are those polarities. But the primary polarity transcends astrology, because then that takes the question of a polarized living and it moves it into astrological themes, which is the subject of a book, a booklet, or a lecture. But I think what we've already discussed is the primary polarity between soul and personality. And that transcends signs, it transcends planets. How that relates to you astrologically is, given this person's horoscope, how do they go about lining up their personality and their soul? And that's where what I've developed, a system called Soul-Centered Astrology. In my approach to reading a chart, I find it, because most people who are coming to see me are coming because of existential questions, rather than should I marry this girl or not, or should I invest in this company or not. I mean, of course, I still get those kinds of questions from people, and fine, I'm happy to answer them if I can. But the majority of people who come to see me are involved with existential questions of personal evolution. And then you have to enter into, all right, says the astrologer to himself, where is polarization taking place in this person's life? Is it taking place on the level of emotion? It usually is. Is it taking place on the level of mind? It usually is. Is it manifesting in a dual lifestyle in some way? It usually does. So how can we then see that and give a person a point of solution? How can we present to a person a point of solution? When you present a place of solution to a person relative to their dualities, you have to confront them with loss. You have to confront them with loss. Because you have to say, hey, look, in order to get out of this particular quandary, you have to sacrifice something. So are you ready to sacrifice X, Y, and Z? Are you ready to sacrifice this job, which is making you crazy? Because you cannot adjust yourself within that job so that that job does not make you crazy. And you've tried and you've tried. So how do you confront the fear of being jobless? I mean, you have to work at it that way if you're dealing with the dynamics of physical plane living. But the majority of people, as I said now, who come to me are people who are aware that there is a transcendental life. They're aware that there is a relationship between the soul and personality, and they're aware that there is a place of resolution, but they haven't been able to find it, or they have found it and they want some support that what they have found is correct. So they come and they say, is this correct?
Right, some validation.
That's the word, validation. And then, I'm pretentious enough to say I can tell them if that is valid or not. And I'll tell you why I'm pretentious enough. Because no one will come to you for a reading who is more conscious than you are. Otherwise, you'd be going to them. So anyone who's coming to you for a consultation, they may be more advanced than you on certain levels of being, of course. They may be a great artist. I'm drawing stick figures, for God's sake. But or they may know a bit more about or a lot more about the subtleties of emotional contact with other people than you do. But there's a place in the dynamics of being where you're more evolved, and as you're older, and as a result, you can give them a reflection which can be a validation or not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming to see you. Energetically, they wouldn't be attracted to you.
That was very well said. You're a very eloquent man. I appreciate talking with you very much.
Oh, well, God bless you and your work, Randall.
You know, would it be possible for me to let this all sink in and perhaps book another part 2 to go into some depth into some things perhaps at a later date? Would you be open to that?
Why not? I have a Gemini moon. I can do things twice.
Well, I'm hoping not to do it twice, but I'm hoping we can we can delve into some other aspects of what we've talked about.
Whatever works for you, my brother. Whatever works.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. God bless you. I'm going about my business. I'm sure you're going about yours, and we will speak again. Just contact me whenever it's convenient.
I will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very
welcome.
welcome.
To speak with you.
Thank you. Bye for now, my friend.